Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes books for $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download, including my latest and greatest NYPD Laughing in the Line of Duty. I hope everyone's having a good week. Before we get started with this week's story, let's go to the crime beat of the New York Post. The driver who plowed into a Long Island nail salon, killing an NYPD cop and three others, guzzled booze behind a supermarket before the 78-mile-an-hour crash, prosecutors said. Stephen Schwally, 64 years old, spent more than 5 hours drinking Montebello Long Island iced tea and cruising around the town before the horrific crash. Later yelling at first responders, "Get me out of here, I'm a Marine," the Suffolk County prosecutors said Thursday. Now, what I find unusual about this case is, and it's not in this article at the very least, I can't find anywhere where they said what his blood alcohol level was. And having worked in a DUI unit, when there's an accident like that, they probably took him straight to the hospital. They didn't do a breathalyzer or an Alka-Seltzer. And what they do is they ask for a blood draw. If he refuses or if he's incapacitated, what they do is someone will go and they'll get a search warrant basically for your blood. It doesn't take that long. A judge will sign off on it immediately if there's something like this with a fatality. And I don't see anything about a blood draw. But for those of you that have access to the New York Post, I encourage you to go online and see what this guy looks like. He's 64 years old, and if that's what I'm going to look like in 6 years, I might as well end it now. And I hope they throw the book at him, because a poor off-duty female cop by the name of Amelia Renhack was getting her nails done, and it's a Saturday afternoon and you're just running errands on your day off, and three other people were just sitting there, and this moron comes blasting in there and kills them. It's a terrible story. Speaking of terrible stories, this is kind of a little personal. The mastermind of the September 11 attacks and two other terrorists being held in Guantanamo Bay will be spared the death penalty under a deal with prosecutors, it was revealed Thursday. The announcement was a bitter pill to swallow for the victims' families, who anxiously waited the conclusion of the case for nearly 24 years. There's more to this story. I mean, the guy's name is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He looked like he's the guy that they rolled out of bed. There's that famous photo. He looks like he just got out of bed. He's got a bed head, and there's two other guys they locked up with him. It's almost, and I hate to say this, but I almost wonder if there was something. I don't think 9/11 was an inside job by any stretch of the imagination, but do I think that there's more to that story that they don't want revealed? Either A, how they collect intelligence, or B, was this guy working for us at one time? But for whatever reason now, I mean, if anybody deserves the death penalty, it's these three clowns. So what's going to happen is they're going to take them off Guantanamo, and at some point they'll be transferred to ADX Florence, the Supermax prison in Colorado. That's where actually Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's, I think it's his cousin or his protege, Ramzi Youssef has been. Ramzi Youssef was the guy behind the first World Trade Center bombing, the truck bombing in the basement of the World Trade Center. Yeah, this is an unusual story. The city councilwoman charged with biting a cop during a protest against a homeless shelter is facing renewed scrutiny over a rally in her support organized by a group led to the Chinese Communist Party. Councilwoman Suzanne Zhang, 43rd District, claimed to the New York Post that she had no involvement in the rally that drew hundreds of supporters who marched from Manhattan to Brooklyn on Sunday. But messages on the Chinese social media app WeChat have raised eyebrows, with critics now accusing of Zhuang as a liar. I really hope that the Communist Chinese Party hasn't begun installing operatives in our government. It's scary, but there's actually a pretty funny photo on the Post of her biting a guy. Well, it's not funny that the cop got bit, but I mean, for her to deny it. Now, this has nothing to do with New York, but I'm down here in Florida, so I thought this was interesting. Headless, limbless alligator carcasses have been showing up in Florida canals. State officials have no idea why. The most recent reptilian corpse was found dismembered in the Caribbean Canal in Fort Myers shores over the weekend. That's an odd story. I don't know why anybody would poach alligators. I mean, they're all over the place, but I've had alligator once in a restaurant. Tasted like chicken. It was fried, but wouldn't have it again. I have no idea why there are people going around whacking alligators and then chopping them up and dumping them in canals. This story is actually funny. This actually is like what comes around goes around. And I've seen this guy before on the internet. The NYPD arrested an anti-police watcher after a heated altercation with the Secret Service detail assigned to Kamala Harris's stepdaughter on Tuesday, the video shows. Ella Emhoff, the daughter of the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, was inside a Tribeca restaurant for lunch, of course, at 12:40 p.m. when Harry Hyman, who lives around the corner, confronted her detail outside, according to cops in the clip. The 45-year-old goes around the city complaining about cars that have NYPD placards that can park wherever they want instead of driving around the block. Hyman was wearing a black shirt, confronted one of Emhoff's plainclothes agents at Hudson and North Moore Street, not knowing they were part of the Secret Service. The agitator allegedly ripped the license plate covers off both the black SUVs parked in the street during the argument, leading the NYPD call to the scene. Emhoff, who was inside with a friend, was rushed out of place to one of the SUVs. Hyman was arrested and charged with second-degree obstruction and governmental administration and fourth-degree criminal assault. And he's already out of jail. So this guy goes around the internet. He makes videos. He's just a guy who runs around with a camera, and whenever he sees an NYPD car illegally parked or he thinks the cops are doing something wrong, he jumps in and films it. And I mean, obviously he hates cops and doesn't like where they park, and I guess that's his prerogative. But he flew a little close to the sun, and he thought it was NYPD guys, and it actually turned out to be Kamala Harris's daughter's security detail. And, you know, in light of what just happened 2 weeks ago to President Trump, the Secret Service isn't playing games anymore. I don't blame them. And this clown is running around like an EDP pulling covers off of cars, as per the story. So, you know, kind of got what he deserved. So this story is going to lead into what we're going to talk about today. Venezuelan gang gives green light to shoot U.S. cops. Members of the violent Venezuela gang, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Tren de Aragua, has been given the green light to fire on cops. A federal memo was obtained. So these Venezuelan gangs aren't screwing around. They're in every major U.S. city. They're crisscrossing the nation. And we're locking them up and they're getting out, or they're in our jail system, and we're not deporting them back to their country. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about my experiences with immigration. Now they're called ICE. And it's a bit of a convoluted story, so just kind of stick with me. It kind of comes to fruition in the end. So as I've told you guys, I spent my last 10 years as a detective in the NYPD's Auto Crime Division. It's a very prestigious place, or at least it was. It was very difficult to get in there. And there were two types of people that worked there. You had the guys that were car guys that made a lot of car arrests in the precincts and then went to borough auto larceny units. And then, you know, hopefully you got picked to go to the NYPD's Auto Crime Division, the major leagues. Then you had guys that didn't work that hard to get in there. And they were either related to someone above the rank of captain, or they lived near a chief or an inspector and they befriended them, or however it happened. We used to call it parachuting in. So for me to get into Auto Crime Division, I had to go through an extensive interview. Had to go through an OCCB interview. Then I had to go through an auto crime interview, and they asked me a lot of tough questions. And, you know, I had a lot of stolen car arrests, and I got in. These guys, they just parachute in. There's no interview. All of a sudden on the FATN machine or the finance system, a teletype will come up. Joe Blow has been assigned to the Auto Crime Division. You're like, who the hell is this? And then all of a sudden you'll hear out in the main office in Queens, like, did you interview this guy? Like, who is this guy? And the guy just shows up one day. And then you come to find out, either someone will call up and tell you, yeah, that guy is related to Chief so-and-so, or that one's related to a politician. And oftentimes these people that show up, they weren't even cops first, really. I mean, they really didn't do anything in their careers, and then they go to a specialized unit, and then you try to train them, and a lot of them are entitled, and they have no interest in learning the work. They just want to work there because it's prestigious, and B, I guess they figure it's safer than patrol. So later in my career, I guess I was in like my 17th or 18th year, this guy shows up to our office, and he's an older guy. And when I say older, I mean, I was pushing 40. He was probably pushing 50 or in his mid 40s. And he just shows up, and we come to find out that he's a phone call. He didn't work to get in there. No one from our office, like, guys, like, you'll see the up and coming guys from the precincts making stolen car arrests. They're always asking you for your advice. How do I get in there? And they finagle their way in. This guy just shows up one day. So the way he got in was he joined every fraternal organization in the NYPD and became like I'm not going to say which organization, obviously, but he became like second grand poobah or grand poobah of these commands. And, these chiefs join these organizations. So, oh, chief, I can do this for you. Oh, chief, I can do that for you. And then, the chief doesn't know any better. He just deals with this guy on one level. He doesn't have to work with him. And, where would you like to go? You know what? I think I'd like to go to the auto crime division. All the chief's got to do is make a phone call and wave his magic wand, and this guy shows up in our office, and now we've got to deal with him. So I wasn't tasked with trying to train him, but I know who was, and they said it was just very difficult because he wanted to work. Unlike the other contracts that come into our office, he did want to work. The problem was he didn't spend much time being a cop. So everything he really knew about the job he was a know-it-all. So everything was like he talked like a bad 1970s Kojak episode. And that's kind of the way he acted, too. And that's not the way it is in the street. And he didn't know how to talk to people. He didn't know how to talk to district attorneys. He didn't know how to talk to supervisors. He didn't know how to talk to criminals. And I remember one time him getting mouthy with a guy in a body shop. And I turned to him and I pulled him aside and I said, and he wasn't a big guy. He was actually a little guy. And I said, listen, you talk to people like that. Yeah, you got a badge and a gun. Someday someone's going to turn around and punch you right in the teeth. There was no talking to him. You would have thought that our supervisors would have reeled him in. And in my office, there were several teams. He was in one of the teams, and he was assigned a sergeant. And then there was like 3 or 4 sergeants running 3 or 4 teams in my office, and then you had a lieutenant. But the problem was his sergeant, all the sergeants, and our lieutenant, who was a good guy, caught wind of who he knew and the people he was involved with up in one police plaza. So they were terrified of him. They never reined him in. Like, if I would have pulled the crap, or anybody in my office that didn't have his kind of juice would have pulled the crap that he did, they would have been out on their rest. They would have gotten transferred. They would have gotten kicked to the detective bureau or sent to narcotics in another borough. But this guy was just allowed to go along his merry way. And like I said, he had no concept of becoming of what it was to be a cop, let alone a detective. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, he was in a team. They did an inspection of a body shop or a junkyard, I forget, somewhere in the Bronx or Manhattan. And he goes in with a bunch of guys, and they find, I don't know, a couple of stolen fenders or an engine or something. So he locks up a couple of the workers. The owner of the place is nowhere to be found. Either the owner slipped out the back door, he just wasn't there that day. So he wrote up the arrests for the guys that were in the body shop or the junkyard with the stolen parts. And normally what you do is you wait a couple of days, and you and your partner, or even you and the sergeant, you go back. At least 2 of you, 3 is you go back to the location. Okay, come on out, let's go. And usually they've got a lawyer because they know you're looking for them. So, all right, the lawyer will call. I don't want you talking to the guy. All right? He doesn't do that. So on his way into work, he stops at this body shop by himself with his own personal car, goes in, tells the owner of the place, "You're under arrest. Follow me back to the office." And the guy says, oh, he's lucky that the guy he arrested was a decent guy. It wasn't like a real badass. The guy goes, okay. And the bad guy jumps in his car and starts following this detective to our office. So I'm sitting in the office, and the phone rings, and it's this detective, and he goes, "Tell Sergeant so-and-so I got a collar." So I'm looking at my watch, and I think I was like the first or second guy in the office, and I'm like, "What tour are you working?" "Oh, I haven't come in yet." I'm like, "Well, how do you have a collar?" So he explained it to me, and I went, hold on one second. So I cup the phone, I walk into the supervisor's office, and I tell the sergeant, I go, "Listen, your guy is coming." He goes, "What? He picks up the phone, and his first reaction is going to scream, because if that would have been anyone else, they would have gotten lit up. He caught himself, and he tells the guy, he goes, all right, that's not what I wanted you to do. We discussed this, so obviously there was a conversation. We discussed this, so all right, bring him in. So he brings in the arrest, and then I got tasked, because his partner wasn't in yet, I got tasked with going downstairs and helping him process the arrest. And like I said, he was pretty much clueless. So, and that could have gone sideways, a lot of ways. First of all, what if he would have went in there, and let's just say for argument's sake, that junkyard is also a place where weight is coming in, drugs, or things happen in these places. I mean, not all body shops and junkyards that someone's getting whacked in the back, but it's been known to happen. What if he goes in there by himself, and the guy is either pissed off at him that he screwed up his business, or they're doing something else in there? He would have wound up in the trunk of the car. So let's not think that's sinister. The guy knows what kind of car he drives now. He's following him in his personal vehicle. He's got his license plate. He knows the make and model. He knows where he parks his car now. So if he wants to wait 6 months and get 50 cents worth of gas and torch his car in the parking lot, he knows the guy's car, and he knows where he parks it. So this was the kind of thing that went on. And like I said, it wasn't that he didn't want to work. He just didn't know what he was doing, and that made him even more dangerous. So all of a sudden, he wants to run a case, and he really doesn't know what he's doing, and no one's going to tell him no. So somehow he gets a hold of this informant that owned like a little body shop, and he signs this guy up as an informant, and the guy is just giving him bullshit. Like, I'm hearing bits and pieces in the office, and he's making this like he's got this big case. And basically what it was is he caught this guy in a body shop, same thing with a couple of bad fenders. The guy doesn't want to get kicked out of his business, so he agrees to cooperate. But the guy isn't giving him anything. I don't even know if the guy had anything to give him. But what he did give him was, there was a couple of neighborhood kids in this neighborhood, and they weren't professional car thieves. And this detective tells the informant, well, if you know anybody stealing cars and they're looking to sell them, tell me. So what does the body shop guy do? He goes out and he starts asking kids, hey, do you know how to steal a car? You don't want to feed a market. You don't want to create a market. If you hear that people are stealing cars and looking to sell them, great. You don't put out a feeler out there, hey, is anyone stealing cars out there? But anyway, he gets a response. And there's these teenage kids, and what they start doing is, they're not professional car thieves. They start jumping into people's double parked cars. So if you run into, in New York, everybody double parks. Well, they used to double park their car because there's no parking. People leave the keys in the ignition with the motor running, run in to grab a newspaper, a container of milk. These teenagers would walk around their neighborhood, and if they saw, and it didn't matter what kind of car it was, it could be a nice car or a shit box. These kids start stealing the cars. They start calling up the body shop guy. The body shop guy calls up this detective, and now, we're making buys. I wasn't personally, but the guys in his team he had an undercover, would meet with these kids, and they were shitty cars. It was just, they weren't professional thieves. They were more opportunists. So this is going on for a while, and with a case, you have a mission. It's okay. We want to get the top guy, or we want to stop these guys from doing this. He's just filling up the Whitestone Pound with these shitty cars with these kids. And let's face it, it's the Bronx, so no matter how many cars they steal, they're going to get next to nothing jail time, if they get any jail time. So his sergeant comes to me and says, I need you to do me a favor. And I had worked for this guy before, and he's a great guy. And I says, well, what can I do for you? And he says the detective's name. And I said, yeah. He goes, what I need you to do is, he goes, I don't understand what he's doing. He says, I want you to work with him for a while and see if this case is going to go anywhere. He says, because right now it's stalled. He's yelling at the informant to produce more. He goes, I really don't want, and he didn't say like, I really can't do anything with this guy, but I read between the lines. So I'm paired with this detective to help him with his case. And I discover what I just told you guys. This thing is going nowhere. And I explain it to the sergeant. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to put an end to this thing. He goes, because if I tell him, listen, take the case down. You got a month, you got 2 months. Wrap up all your loose ends. We're going to take the case down. He will go and cry to some chief somewhere that he's got this great case, and they're not letting him do it. And then they're going to start calling up Queens, and Queens is going to call our office. Shit rolls downhill. I said, I'll see what I can do. So one day this detective comes to me and he says, do you want an informant? I hated working with informants. I never really had much luck with them. I had a handful and I never trusted them, and they're always a pain in the ass, very needy. I says, why? What's up? He says, the guy, my informant that owns the body shop, his partner in the body shop wants to be a CI too, wants to be a confidential informant too. And I go, well, it doesn't work that way. You know, we don't go around looking for informants. If they come to us, fine. But I go, I don't understand. I go, you got a guy that's basically giving you next to nothing, and his business partner wants to become an informant. He goes, yeah. I go, well, how does his business partner know that he's an informant? He goes, well, he must have told them. I go, well, first of all, he's not supposed to tell anybody. That's the whole thing of being a confidential informant. You're not supposed to tell anybody. But I was intrigued. I thought it was total bullshit. So I said, okay, let's meet with him. So we meet with his informant and his business partner who wants to be an informant. And we meet with them at a Burger King up on Broadway in Riverdale, the other end of the Bronx from where these guys were working at. And I'm talking to this guy, and basically all he knows is what the other guy knows. I said, you really want to be an informant, huh? He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I could get you guys a lot of stuff, but he's not telling me what he's going to get, right? I says, well, I can't just sign you up as an informant. I says, and there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of background checks. You gotta check this guy through all these different databases to make sure he's not working with another federal agency, right? So guy had no ID. I says, what, are you kidding me? He goes, well, I had a problem with my drive. He just gives me a name, has no ID, and he wants to be an informant. I says, I'll tell you what. I says, come with me over the 50th precinct over in Riverdale. I says, I got to fingerprint you anyway to be an informant. Let's start the process now. And he got a little nervous. He goes, why do you want to fingerprint me? I says, dude, how is this going to work? I says, we know who your buddy is. And his buddy told him, yeah, let him fingerprint you. You haven't been arrested in years, blah, blah, blah. The guy goes, all right. So I fingerprinted him, and I took what's called major case fingerprints. So when you get arrested, it's your fingertips, right? Major, and maybe they've changed it since, but major case fingerprints, it's a different kind of card. And I took his palm prints because I said, I don't want a serial killer. So I took every type of fingerprint you can imagine, and I submitted it. A couple of days later, I get a notification back from BCI, and the guy who wants to be the informant, that landed in my lap, he was grabbed by customs or immigration, sneaking over the border in Nogales in 90-something or early 2000s or late 90s. And they gave him, what's going on now, they gave him an immigration date 4 years later. He never showed up. He's been arrested a bunch of times, and he's just living La Vida Loca in the United States. So he's wanted by customs. So I didn't say a word to this detective, and I walked into his supervisor's office, who asked me to give him a hand. And I says, well, I think I got something. And he goes, what do you have? And I said, the guy he wants me to sign up as an informant is wanted by the feds. And he goes, oh, shit. I go, no. I says, I'm going to get him deported. He goes, are you going to tell him? I said, no. I said, I'm not telling him anything. I says, just watch what happens. So I call up immigration and I send over the paperwork. And this is when they were actively kicking people out of the country that don't belong here, that serve no purpose. And they said, oh, we'd love to pick him up. He's an easy number for us. Do you know where he is? I said, I sure do. So one morning they came to my office. I parked down the block. I watched them go into the body shop, and they take the guy out and they leave, right? I go back to the office. I'm having my coffee. This other detective comes in. Now his phone is blowing up. And he's like, what? Where? You got to be kidding me. Gets off the phone and he goes, Vic, you're never going to guess. Let's just say the guy's name was Billy. He goes, Billy's partner, the one you wanted to sign up? The one that I wanted to sign up. I go, oh, yeah, what about him? He goes, the feds just came in and took him. I says, okay, well, let me make some phone calls and see what I can find out. So what I do is I go down. I think they had him at 26 Federal Plaza, but it was an immigration detention center, or maybe the headquarters at 26 Fed. But I remember going to see him. He was in a bullpen with a bunch of other guys. And he's like, I go, what happened? He goes, what happened? He goes, you fingerprinted me. He goes, and I'm here. I go, were you wanted? He goes, well, yeah, kind of. I go, well, did you tell anybody you were wanted? And then he takes a step back and he goes, well, I told my girlfriend. He says, let me see what I can do. So I go back and I have a cup of coffee, and then I come back out and I go, there's nothing I can do. And I leave. So the process goes like this. They processed him in Manhattan, and then there was an immigration detention center right over the bridge in New Jersey. And from what they told me, they go, yeah, he's going to be here about 2 weeks, less than a month. He goes, and then they're going to deport him back to, I forget what country he was from. They're going to deport him back, to wherever he came from. I said, okay. So what wound up happening is his informant now gets pissed off because his informant figured it out that I screwed his partner, but there was nothing he could do about it. So ultimately what wound up happening is, once that happened, the sergeant went to him and says, all right, look, you've had 6 months at this thing. You've bought 10, 15 shitty cars, and we're going to take the case down. He wasn't happy about it. I know that much because he thought the case was, so much bigger than it really was, but it wasn't. And like I said, that's when immigrations and custom enforcement, they were actively doing their jobs. Now it seems like they're more doing things passively. But back then, if you called them up with an easy number, and again, that guy was in the country over 20 years or close to it, had been arrested a bunch of times, but always made bail and took off, and never carried ID, probably always gave bogus addresses. So even when they did go to look for him, they were never going to find him because he knew the law was looking for him. So that's my story about working with customs and immigration. And I got other stories, but I'll tell that one today. As always, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Mantua, New Jersey, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Chico, California, Middleburg, Florida, Cassopolis, Michigan, and the great city of St. Peters, Missouri. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background and would like to be a guest on the show, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. You can follow me there too. And I just got a TikTok account at VicFerrari50. If you enjoyed the content, please check out my Amazon author page. Type in my name, Vic Ferrari Like the Car, where you can preview all my books for free, including my latest NYPD, Laughing in the Line of Duty. Thank you again for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next week.